This is the story of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, the great revolutionary freedom fighter of India. It is a fascinating story. Present generation has not experienced the freedom struggle. So, for them, this fascinating story, I am sure, will be a wonderful experience. Subhas was born in Cuttack in 1897. You see, his parents were at that time staying in Cuttack. Janakinath Bose, his father, was a lawyer practicing in Cuttack, and his mother was Prabhavati Bose. Now, so he went to school also from the Cuttack house. Now, he was one of the younger children. He had many elder brothers and sisters. So, he was very eager to go to school. So, when he was 5 years old, he was put into a fashionable missionary school of Cuttack. But he was so excited that when the coach came to take him to the school, he ran and he fell and he hurt himself and could not go to school at all on that day. He was greatly disappointed. Anyway, then he started to go to this missionary school. You see, missionary school, everybody spoke in English, but he did not know English at all at that time. But he tried to imitate others. He had a classmate, Ronen, who was also his uncle. So, one day Ronen and Subhas were sharpening their pencils, and then Subhas said, "Ronen, mot, I sure." What he meant was that Ronen's pencil was not sharp enough and his was very sharp. Everybody laughed at his attempt at speaking English. Anyway, after he finished his missionary school period, when he was about 12 years old, he was put into a proper school. That time, his problem was different. He went to a Bengali medium school and he did not know Bengali at all at that time. Now, in that school, he was asked to write an essay, maybe on a cow or a horse. He wrote, but his Bengali was very, very poor. It was actually ridiculous what he wrote. So, his teacher read out the article in the class, and all his classmates were rolling with laughter. Subhas felt very humiliated, and he did not say anything, but from that day on, he started at home learning Bengali very well. And when after the term finished and the time for examination came, who came first? Subhas Chandra Bose came first in Bengali. He was very intelligent and quick at picking up all that was taught in school. Now, this was a famous school actually of Cuttack, Ravenshaw Collegiate School, and the headmaster there was Benimadhav Das. Benimadhav Das had a great influence in the life of young Subhas. He taught him, first of all, how to admire nature, the beauty of nature. Apart from that, he also taught him what was right and what was wrong, the moral values of life. He was taught by Beni Madhav Das. So Beni Madhav's influence on him was indeed very great. But as he grew up, another great influence came into his life. That was the influence of Swami Vivekananda. In adolescence, Subhas was looking for an ideal, what to follow. At that time, he chanced upon the works, the books of Swami Vivekananda, and he was really electrified. He was inspired by what he read. He got those books at his home and read it through. And Vivekananda was a great influence in his life. From those days, even at school, when he is still at school, he was trying to look after the poor people, the sick people. He would sometimes not go to class and go and try to nurse the sick people or look after poor people. In a way, he neglected his studies at that time, and his parents were a bit worried. Subhas Chandra himself had said that at home, his mother, Prabhavati, was the person who ruled the roost. She looked after all the children, and she was very strict. She saw to it that they did their homework, they did their studies, all that. Even so, naturally, they were a bit upset when they saw that Subhas was spending his time more on social work rather than his studies. But whatever that may be, when the school leaving examination came, matriculation examination it was called in those days, well, he did very well in the examination. He came second in the whole of the university examination. So whatever social work he did, he was neglecting his studies, no doubt, but he came out in his examination with flying colors. Now was the time to go to college. So he came to Calcutta, to his Elgin Road home, from where he started to go to Presidency College. While at Presidency College, he always took interest in extracurricular activities, in debates, or also social work. If there was a flood, they would go to help the flood hit people and all that. Now, at that time, in his mind he was searching also for a guru. He had a religious tendency in his mind also. Now, so with one of his friends, Hemanto, he left the house without telling anybody and went to all pilgrims looking for a real guru. Now, naturally, the family was very, very upset at that. And what did he do? He went to Agra, he went to Benares, he went to Mathura, Vrindavan, but he was also somewhat disappointed because he saw that although many monks practiced religion, they also had a caste bias. Somebody would not eat with somebody, somebody would not take the drinking water from the same well, things like that. He got disappointed. And in Agra and also in Benares, the Swamiji who looked after the Ramakrishna mission told him that this was not his life. His life was meant for something else. And in Agra also he met another monk who also said, this is not your life. So one day he came back again to home and everybody was relieved to see him. But during the Presidency College days, something else happened which was very important in his life. There was a professor called Professor Otten, and the students believed that he said something which was humiliating for Indian students. And so one day Professor Otten was beaten by the students of Presidency College in the college itself. Now, this was a terrible thing to happen at that time, an European professor being beaten by Indian students. So, there was an inquiry committee, and naturally Subhas was always the leader of the students. So, he was asked, do you support this incident? He only said there was provocation for it. However, he was expelled by his principal from the college. This expulsion, Subhas Chandra himself had said, sort of changed his life. For the first time, he understood what leadership meant, and also that leadership meant a lot of sacrifice also. Anyway, he was expelled from college, and for 1 year he could not study anywhere, nobody would take him. After that, after 1 year, after a lot of attempts by his relatives, he was taken into Scottish Church College. There he finished his studies. He had philosophy honors, and again he came out there with flying colors. He did not neglect his studies this time, and he finished his graduation from Scottish Church College. Subhas's father called him to his room one day. He saw his father was there and his elder brother Subhas Chandra Bose, Mej Dada as he called him, the second elder brother, he was there. Both of them suggested to him that he should go to England and study for the ICS examination. In those days, ICS examination was a great thing. If you passed it, you became a government servant and you had a lot of money, salary, other perks, everything. Now, for Subhas, it was a dilemma, because he knew in his mind that he will never serve the British government. But at the same time, the idea of going abroad and having a taste of how the world outside was tempted him. And he said yes. So he was sent to England. he went and got enrolled in Cambridge University for his tripos, and at the same time was studying for ICS. He even thought that I may not pass the ICS. Who knows? It is a very difficult examination after all, and time was very short. But as it happened, he again did very well in his examination. In the ICS examination, he did very well. In the English paper, he was so good. Everybody, he himself was surprised, and everybody else was surprised also. So, after he became the ICS, I mean passed the ICS examination, it was a real dilemma for him. What will he do now? And how can he tell his family that he does not want to become an ICS officer and serve a foreign government? He wanted to serve his nation, India. He wrote a long letter to his Mejdada, the elder brother, Subhas Chandra Bose. You see, here I should tell you that Subhas Chandra Bose always looked after with great affection to the younger brother Subhas, and he was a person who understood that Subhas was made of a different sort of metal. He cannot be judged as a normal, any young person. He was very talented, and as Subhas himself had said when he wrote letters to his mother, very philosophic letters, long letters, where he said that, you see, I have a mission in my life. He had said again and again, I have a mission in my life. And he also asked his mother in a letter, will you be very happy if I become a judge or a barrister, earn a lot of money? Or will you be happy if I become a true human being, honest and serving other people? Now, Subhas Chandra Bose understood that this brother was a bit different. Now, he wrote a letter to his brother and said that you will understand, and if you forgive me, then I don't mind what other family members may think. You have to tell me that you have not minded what I am doing. And he said, I know that you have spent a lot of money also on me. Please consider all the money that you have spent for me was a sacrifice to the mother nation, and please try to understand that I want to give up ICS, come back and serve my nation. So he resigned from the ICS, and in the meantime he has also written to Deshabandhu Chittaranjan Das and said that I want to come and serve my country. What can I do? So he resigned from the ICS and wrote also to his friend Chadu Chandra Ganguly that now I am sailing into unknown waters. Let us see what happens. He came in those days in a ship and landed in, at that time, Bombay, today's Mumbai, and met Gandhiji there. Gandhiji also asked him to go to Bengal, speak to Deshabandhu, and try to see how he can join the freedom struggle. So he came. Deshabandhu got from that day a great disciple, and Subhas Chandra also always looked upon Deshabandhu as his political mentor. Now, at that time, Gandhiji had given the call that all the students should come out from their schools and colleges. People who are working in the government offices should give up their job. Everybody must come and join the freedom struggle. You know, when he was coming by boat from England to India, in that same ship was Rabindranath Tagore. And young Subhas and Rabindranath had long conversations about this boycott movement that Gandhiji had started. Now, Tagore was not very sure about the boycott of educational institutions, but Subhas was very enthusiastic at that time. They must all now be in the freedom struggle and not think of anything else. So, when he came, there was something called a national college, where people who came out from schools and colleges will go and they will be taught there. Deshabandhu had started it, and Subhas became a teacher in that college. Now, as you see, it is very difficult to give up your education, your career, and just jump into a movement. There were not many students in the National College at that time, but Subhas was very serious about his teaching. So, there is a joke, you know, that if somebody came and said, where is Subhas Babu? Then his colleagues would say, oh, Subhas, he is teaching, he is in the class, and he is teaching empty benches. That was the joke, because there was not many students. But as I said, he was very serious about his work, and he carried on as best as he could there. Now, altogether, he was in prison so many times, you know, but the first prison time came at this point when Deshabandhu Chittaranjan Das and he himself both were in prison in Calcutta together. And he looked after Deshabandhu very well, even in the prison. I have had the good fortune to hear from Basanti Devi, wife of Deshabandhu, about those days. Basanti Devi used to go sometimes to the prison to see Deshabandhu. And she said that Subhas looked after him so well, and he even cooked. He fried puris and, you know, begun bhaji. So, puri, bhaji, these he used to make and give to Deshabandhu. And in the prison, all the other prisoners joked, you know, Deshabandhu has a cook who is actually an ICS officer. So, to have an ICS as a cook, that was the joke at that time. The next time when Subhas was imprisoned, he was sent to Burma, now called Myanmar. In those days, the British always used to send freedom fighters away from their home state or home city as far as possible. As you know, Bengali and Punjabi revolutionaries were sent to Andaman. Now, Subhas was sent to Burma, to the Mandalay prison. He wrote wonderful letters from Mandalay prison, some to Subhas Chandra Bose's wife, his sister-in-law Bibhavati Bose, where he mentioned little things that happened in the prison, but also serious letters to the brother Subhas Chandra Bose. Now, when he was in Mandalay, he said that he really missed Bengal and India. In one of his letters, he said, now that I am away from Bengal, I can understand how much I love Bengal and India. And he said the famous song that Rabindranath Tagore had written, Amar Sonar Bangla Ami Tomaye Bhalobashi, which is now of course the national song of Bangladesh. Now he said that I almost feel that Tagore had written that song for me, because now I feel how much I love Bengal, how much I love my country. So that was a great experience in his life also. But you know, whenever he was in prison, his health broke down. He was very, very sick. And then at last, the British government had to release him. He was so sick. So he was released and he came back to Elgin Road, to his home here. There were two houses at that time, Elgin Road house, which is now Netaji Bhavan, and the neighboring house, the next house, which was also taken by Subhas Chandra Bose. And he lived in that house with his elder brother at that time. And he had to recuperate, you know. He was quite ill, and they went to Shillong so that he can recuperate his health. After he recuperated his health, he came back and he jumped into the political struggle again. And at that time, the Congress session of 1928 took place in Calcutta. Motilal Nehru was that time the president of Congress, and of course all of the leaders came. Gandhiji was there, and Subhas was in charge of the volunteers. Now he rode on horseback as a GOC in charge of the volunteers, and the volunteers were also in uniform. Even women volunteers were there. And from that time we can see that he had a sort of a tendency towards military discipline. He was a very disciplined at that time as in charge of the volunteers. We are told that Gandhiji did not like that very much. But anyway, 1928 Congress, we have beautiful photographs of that, Subhas Chandra Bose wearing an uniform and on horseback trying to organize the volunteers of the Congress session. So time passed, and a time came when the Congress took charge of Calcutta Corporation. Deshabandhu Chittaranjan asked him to take charge of it as an officer. We are told that he was angry, and he said, did I give up ICS to become an officer in the Calcutta Corporation? He did not want to take the salary also. Here I can tell you, Bashanti Devi told me that I put out my sari and said, Subhas, give me your salary. We need it. The movement needs money also. So don't be like that. So he worked there for some time, and after some time, actually, he also became the mayor of Calcutta. when he was the mayor of Calcutta, he had led a procession on the Chowrangi road here, and the British had lathi charged that procession. He was also injured, and we have pictures of that, the mayor leading a procession and being lathi charged there. Anyway, as a mayor of Calcutta, he tried to do a lot for the city of Calcutta. Some of the things which even today we are trying to do and have not been able to do for the city. What he thought about the city, what can be done in order to properly organize the city life. He was very serious even about his work as a mayor. But you see, his prison life continued. He was again in prison, again and again in prison, and every time wherever he is in prison, his health totally collapsed. While in prison in the 30s, early 30s, he was really, really very, very ill, but the British would not release him at all. At last they said they can release him if he goes abroad. Actually, it is a kind of exile that they were sending him. You can say that he was exiled to Europe at that time. Now, it was decided that he will go to Vienna for treatment, and when he was taken actually in a stretcher to the ship, after he had been put into the ship, the British released him there. Before that, they would not release him. So, in the 30s, his life in exile in Europe began. But as you know, after he has recuperated a little, he was a little better, he at once started his work even in Europe. He went, he was not to be in Vienna there and not to go to other, he was not allowed, supposed to be go to other states, but he managed. He went to Czechoslovakia, he went to Germany, he went all over Europe, so to say. And you know, he was welcomed everywhere, even as the mayor of Calcutta. He was there seeing what other people were doing, what other work was being done. So the exile in 30s was actually for him an opening, and he worked as an ambassador of India abroad. In Europe, many people did not even know that India was a subject nation, a part of the British colonial system and all that. But he went from one country to another all over Europe and spreading the news of our freedom struggle, how we are fighting for our freedom. And he was accepted anywhere, in many places like Czechoslovakia, for example, in a very friendly manner, and people all over Europe had developed, because of him, a sympathy for our freedom struggle that was going on in India. When Subhas Chandra Bose was going from one country to another in Europe as an ambassador of India's freedom struggle, spreading the news of our struggle at home, other important things also happened in his life. First of all, of course, he had to have an operation, gallbladder operation at that time in Vienna. In those days, those operations were quite, serious. And after the operation, he had to take a rest for quite some time. And he was a person who never liked to take rest. And he was just wondering when he will start again. Anyway, when he was working in Europe, he needed a secretary who could help him, and who would know a bit of English also. And that time, a young Viennese girl came to his help and helped him even writing his book. He was writing his book, Indian Struggle, at that time. She helped in always in all these things to him. Her name was Emilie Schenkel, and later Subhas Chandra Bose married her, but at that time she was very helpful, and when he was recuperating after his operation, there he was again helped by Emilie. After his operation, the doctors asked her to come, so that when he was, he was given anesthesia, and he was not coming out of the anesthesia. So the doctor said, "You come and call him, because a known voice he will answer." So in all ways, she was there helping him in writing the book, Indian Struggle, in other works of freedom struggle of India, as also when he was a patient. The other thing that happened at that time, when he had recuperated a little and was moving around, at that time in Europe, Jawaharlal Nehru's wife, Kamala Nehru, was critically ill, and she was kept in sanatoriums, and Nehru was at that time in prison in India, could not go and see his wife. We find that at that time, Subhas Chandra Bose is going and looking after Kamala whenever whenever he can. She is in different sanatoriums. He himself is recuperating, going to Karlovy Vary for rest, and in the meantime, on the way, he would go and see Kamala Nehru. And Kamala's health deteriorated very much, and at the last moment, the British released Nehru in India so that he could come and see his dying wife. So he came, and at one time, Nehru and Subhas Chandra Bose stayed at the same place, going to see Kamala every day. And unfortunately, Kamala Nehru passed away, and at that time, at the deathbed of Kamala ji, there were three persons: Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhas Chandra Bose, and Indira Gandhi, who was a student and who came from her hostel to see her mother. So this was another aspect during Subhas's stay abroad. Well, you see, they would not allow Subhas to come back at all to India, but his father was in deathbed, and at last they said, "All right, you can go and see your father and come back." But in those days, you know, even by plane, flights took long time to come. By the time he arrived in Karachi, he had news that Janakinath Bose had passed away. So he came, he took part in the funeral rites and then again had to go back to exile, which he did. Now, but when he was in exile, at that time, he decided that I will come back. The British said, if you come back, we will arrest you. He even asked Nehru, what do you think I should do? He said, how long can I be here like that? I will go back, whatever happens. So, he came back to India, and he was at once, of course, arrested as soon as he landed and again put into prison. Well, but the Congress protested against it. Jawaharlal Nehru declared a day called Subhas Day, protesting against his arrest. At that time, by that time, you know, Gandhiji had decided that the next president of Congress will be Subhas Chandra Bose. So, in 1938, Subhas Chandra Bose became, for the first time, the president of Indian National Congress. That session was held in Haripura, and the speech that he gave there at Haripura as Congress president is wonderful, because he always thought about the future. You know, he said we are going to be independent very soon, and as soon as we are independent, we must do this, 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 this. He is ready with all his programs. So, Haripura Congress address that Subhas Chandra Bose gave is a very important landmark in the history of our freedom struggle, and of course, in the history of Indian National Congress. Now, that year passed on well, but then in 1939, again time came a new president to be elected. Subhas Chandra Bose wanted a second term to fulfill some of his work. 1939 happens to be a rather sad episode in our freedom struggle, because Gandhiji did not agree to give him a second term, and in those days there were not any real election for a president. Gandhiji decided who would be president, and everybody agreed to that. So, this became a very critical issue at that point of time. Even Rabindranath Tagore, the poet, said that I would like Subhas to have a second term, because he said in the Indian National Congress there are two modernists, Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhas Chandra Bose. And you see, when Netaji was the president, he had already started the planning committee of Congress, and he had asked Jawaharlal Nehru to be the president of the planning committee. So, Tagore said, let Nehru be the president of the planning committee and let Subhas also carry on. Then the modernization of India would be there. Well, whatever that was, to make a long story short, Gandhiji did not agree. So, perhaps for the first time there was a proper election, and Gandhiji's nominee was Sitaramaya. But to the surprise of everyone, Subhas Chandra won that election, defeating Gandhiji's chosen person. This was unthinkable at that time, but it happened. Now, this did not please Gandhiji naturally, and a time followed where Subhas Chandra Bose was writing, if the whole nation supports me, but I lose your support, Bapu, Gandhiji, to him he said, Bapu, then I will be very, very disappointed. So, please agree to this. Come and tell me the working committee how I shall make it, who will be there. But Gandhiji did not cooperate with him at all. So, after a long tussle at a session in Calcutta, Subhas Chandra Bose resigned from the Congress presidentship. Now, this now opened another avenue in Subhas's life. Now, you see, in Europe, war cloud was gathering. Any day, the Second World War would start. And Subhas Chandra Bose thought that when the British are in a critical position because of the war, this is the time when we should strike at them. We should have a very big sort of movement. But Gandhiji kept on saying the time has not come yet. Well, so what could he do? He decided his own course, what to do. Now, in Calcutta at that time, there was something called a Holwell monument, and Subhas Chandra wanted the Holwell monument to be removed from the Calcutta streets, and there was a movement about that. Now, during that movement, the British arrested Subhas Chandra Bose. Actually, Rabindranath Tagore had come to Calcutta. He was at Jorashako, and Subhas had gone to meet him there, and as he came back, he was arrested. Tagore got the news that he was arrested on his way back, and he was put in prison again. Now, as it always happens, his health was not good at prison, but Subhas Chandra Bose said that during this time, when I think this is the proper time actually to give a blow to the British Empire, the imperialists, I cannot just sit in prison. So he said he will go into a fast unto death, and said, release me or I refuse to live. And he went into a fast unto death. And he meant it actually. Now, the British jailer at that time of the prison told the British governor here, also the Governor General in Delhi, that if this gentleman dies in my prison, then there will be, I don't know what in India, the trouble that will ensue. I am not going to take responsibility for that, I am telling you that, because he is going to die here. So, the British government said, all right, we will release him, and they decided to have a cat and mouse policy. They said, let us now decide to release him, and then when he is a little better, we will put him back. If he again goes into a fast or something, we will release him. This is a cat and mouse policy, which we will continue. Well, actually he was very, very ill. he was put into a stretcher in an ambulance and brought to his Elgin Road residence and taken to his bedroom, where there was no question of his going around anywhere. He was in that room. Of course, the British kept vigilance around the house. There were police outside also, but he was not in a position they thought that he could do anything. But he had decided, why did he want to come out of prison? He had his own plans. He had decided he will go outside India and try to have a new movement from outside India for the freedom of the country. So he was, although in the room, restricted into the room, he was already making his plans. And this is when the great escape took place. He called his young nephew Shishir Bose, son of Subhas Chandra Bose, one day to his room and asked him, "Can you do something for me? আমার একটা কাজ করতে পারবে? Can you do something for me?" Shishir was wondering what it was, just to post a letter or to do some other errand. No, it was not like that. He said, "I want to leave this house secretly. You have to drive me to a secret place from this house, and nobody must know about it." You see, this is a big, the Elgin Road home was a big family home with many people in it. So, for days together, the plan of the great escape went on. Now, Shishir used to live in his father's home, which is one Woodburn Park, almost neighboring. The two houses are so near, you know. He used to come every day, and the family members were told he comes because he can deal with the radio very well, and Subhas Chandra Bose wants to listen to the foreign radios, the news of the war, etc. But actually they were planning this. And then the few people who would know about it, Subhas Chandra Bose had said, in the Elgin Road home, apart from Shishir, Ila, one of the cousin sister, would know, because you need somebody also here to help. She would know. And of course, Subhas's elder brother, Subhas Chandra Bose, and his wife, the sister-in-law Vibhavati, knew about it in the other house, Woodburn Park, and nobody must know about this. In the meantime, it was decided that Shishir would help in the escape from Calcutta, but he wanted to go, he will go to Peshawar and leave from Peshawar, you know, via, he wanted to go to Afghanistan, via Afghanistan. So, in Peshawar also he needed somebody, and Mia Akbar Shah came from Peshawar, and Shishir and Mia Akbar Shah were put together for the arrangements, one on this side and the other one from Peshawar. And Mia Akbar Shah took Shishir also to the shop of Wachan Mullah in those days, where they bought the disguise for Subhas Chandra Bose, the disguise of a Muslim, because he would be in the disguise of a Muslim. Now, so after they had bought all those things, and in the car, Shishir and Mia Akbar Shah went to Howrah station And Biag Pasha said goodbye there. The driver said he is forgetting a packet he had bought. And she said, oh, he had forgotten it. We will send it later. Come on, let's go. So they came. Actually, the packet was the disguise which they had bought there. So after everything was meticulously planned, and somehow nobody really knew about it. Later on, when we saw documents, we saw that there were so many people keeping watch on this house and on Subhas. They are saying today Subhas Chandra Bose had soup. Today the then mayor of Calcutta came to see him. Everything is being reported, but no mention of this. Nobody really knew about it. So 1941, 16th, 17th January night, Subhas Chandra Bose escaped from the Elgin Road house. The car, Wanderer car, which is still in the museum in which he went, the Wanderer car which belonged to Shishir at that time, he had parked near the rear staircase, and deep into the night he came down that staircase and went. Shishir was driving the car and he sat at the back, and the whole night they drove. It was a moonlit night, a beautiful night, and they went up to first to Dhanbad, near Dhanbad, and sometimes Shishir had written about it that Subhas would pour from the flask coffee and say that have some coffee while you are driving. And then Shishir said, why don't you sleep a little? He said, no, when a driver is driving, the other passenger must not sleep. That is not good for the driver at all. So they went, and early in the morning they reached a place called Barari near Dhanbad, where for the daytime they had to take shelter, because in the daytime, however you are in a disguise, people might recognize Subhas Chandra Bose. So at Barari, Shishir's elder brother Ashok Bose used to work and had a bungalow. So in that bungalow during the daytime he rested, and at night again they started from Barari near Dhanbad and went up to Gomo railway station. And at the Gomo railway station, Shishir bade goodbye to his uncle, Raga Kaka Babu, as he used to call him. So the last that he saw him was going on the overbridge, walking as he used to do in a very majestic manner, and a porter going behind him with his luggage on his head. Now, Shishir, they waited in the car for some time, and they saw the train which came, and the train entered, into which Subhas Chandra Bose, alone at that point of time, alone, he went in, and they looked at it. And there is a beautiful description in Shishir's book, how the train passed, and they looked at it. It looked like a garland of, lights which just passed through them, and it went away, and they came back. And of course, coming back was much, in a way, easier. Shishir has written in his book that he sang all the songs that he knew, patriotic songs and all that, on the way back as he came back. Well, so Subhas Chandra Bose, alone from Como to Delhi, and in Delhi to Peshawar also he was alone. And when he arrived in Peshawar, Mia Akbar Shah was there and they welcomed him, and the other part of the conspiracy took place there, how to cross the frontier and go into Afghanistan. And as we know, he had Mia Akbar Shah had arranged for everything, but at that time a person called Bhagat Ram Talwar came to Mia Akbar Shah and wanted to go with Subhas, he wanted to be the guide. So he was given the name of Rahmat Khan, and the two of them just left Peshawar for the unknown journey. It was a very difficult journey, sometimes just on a pony back, sometimes walking, and Subhas Chandra Bose pretending to be deaf and dumb because he could not speak Pushto. So he pretended that he could not speak, and Rahmat Khan said he was going to take him to a pilgrimage so that he can be treated for his illness. Anyway, so after a long journey, they did enter Afghanistan and went into Kabul and took shelter in a sarai there, in an inn there. They lived in the sarai for some time, but the Afghan police had become very suspicious of two persons living there. It was not very safe anymore, so they moved for some time. And in the meantime, they were trying to get out of Afghanistan somehow or other, and they tried first the consulate or the embassy of the Russian, and whether they would help them. Somehow they were unable for quite some time, and for 40 days they were stuck in Kabul. But the Italian there, the Italian embassy was very, very helpful. They helped Netaji and gave him a false passport in the name of Orlando Mazzotta. And with that false passport, he could leave Afghanistan and cross. And later the Afghan police found that the real Orlando Mazzotta of the Italian embassy was still there, but Subhas Chandra Bose has taken the passport and they had gone and there. And the Soviet Russia helped a little, saying that he could of course go through Moscow. So they came to Moscow, and from Moscow he flew to Berlin, and a new chapter in the freedom struggle began from there. You see, Subhas Chandra Bose, what his life, if you think about it, from say 1920 to 1945, the last phase of our freedom struggle, he had a big role to play. First, he was of course in the movement of the non-cooperation movement, non-violent non-cooperation movement of Gandhiji, worked under Gandhiji, became the Congress president and all that. But when he arrived in Berlin, from that day a new chapter in Indian freedom struggle started. Subhas Chandra Bose gave an alternative leadership to Gandhiji's non-cooperation movement, and it was actually war. On the war front, you just face your enemy in the war, face to face, and fight for your freedom. So that was what began, that chapter began from Berlin when he arrived in Berlin. In Berlin, Subhas Chandra Bose first organized a freedom sort of center there, in that center, he took in many of the Indian students who were still in Germany. Because of the war, many had got stuck there also. They joined this center, and he also, was in touch with top German officials, asking for their help in this struggle. Many people have criticized him, saying, why did he go to fascist Germany? Now you see, he had nothing to do with fascism. He was very much against that. Even in the 1930s, when he was in Europe, he was even in Germany, Hitler was rising. He was speaking, standing in Germany itself against Hitler and fascism. Your narrow nationalism, he said, and he was very much against it. He had the courage to speak against even the rising fascist movement of that time. So it is not that he did not know what fascism was, but he wanted during the war to take the help of the other side if he can help in the movement of India's freedom. So now the India desk of the German government at that time was rather sympathetic. There was Adam von Trott there was Alexander Wirth there, who were very, very sympathetic to the freedom movement of India, and they did help Subhas Chandra Bose a lot. Otherwise, whatever he was trying to do, he could not do. Well, Subhas Chandra Bose was accepted as sort of a statesman coming from a foreign country. He was given a house there to stay, Sophienstrasse. He was given the office where he worked. And at that time, as I said, some of the Indian students who joined him, among them was Abid Hassan, who became a very close ally, a very close friend of his. He was there in Europe, he was there with him during the submarine journey, he was there again in Southeast Asia when he arrived. Also there was Swami, who also helped him there. So many of them were there, and he had called also Emilia Schenkel to come from Vienna to Berlin so that she could be of help also. She came there. So a new life began there in that time of our freedom struggle. Now, apart from other things, in his private life also there was some events which was of great significance. It is at that time he married Emilia Schenkel. So they worked together there for the freedom struggle as they were trying, and he also wanted to meet Hitler. There was one meeting with Hitler after some time. As a matter of fact, not much came out of that meeting, but you see, by that time the whole theatre of war was moving from Europe to Southeast Asia. Japan had entered. Japan was moving almost, Burma has been taken almost at the door of India. So Netaji wanted to go to Southeast Asia somehow. Now, actually this Freedom Center of Berlin, that people started calling him Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, the leader. Now, he wanted to go, but that meeting with Hitler at least resulted in one thing, that Hitler said that he would help in moving him from Europe to Southeast Asia. it was not easy. At first, they thought about a plane journey, but the plane journey, that he might take a plane from Rome to Southeast Asia, leaked, and it was terrible, so it could not take place. So something else had to be done. So it was decided that a submarine journey is the only way he can go. It was good that the plane journey did not take place, because in the meantime his daughter was born in Vienna. Subhas Chandra Bose at least could see his baby daughter in Vienna before he left Europe. Now, but it took quite a long time to fix. It was no easy job to have a submarine from Europe, and somewhere in the middle of it, it has to be changed. A Japanese submarine had to be arranged. So the Japanese embassy there and the German officials there, they had a long conferences about this. Time elapsed, So now we say that if somehow Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose could arrive in Southeast Asia in 1942, things might have been different. But he was a bit late, it could not take place at that time. Anyway, it was only in 1943 February that everything was arranged, and Abid Hassan Safrani accompanied him. They went and got into the submarine, and Subhas Chandra Bose had told his wife Emilie that the lights must be on the Sophienstrasse home where they lived at night. Nobody should think that no one is there. For a few days, people should think that people were still living in that house. So everything had to be arranged. So Subhas Chandra Bose left. The movement which he had sort of organized in Berlin itself, the movement, his other colleagues, and Nambiar, ACN Nambiar, was kept in charge of the European Center. He would look after it, he said. And he, of course, on a personal side, he also made a great sacrifice. He left his wife and a baby daughter back there also and left. Now, before he got into the submarine, of course, he wrote a beautiful letter to, again, his Metadada Sharat Chandra Bose, to whom he turned again and again whenever there was a crisis in his life. He wrote to his Metadada that I am today going on a very perilous journey. I do not know if I will see the end of this journey, or if ever we will meet again. So I am leaving my news here. I have married, and my wife and daughter are here. And in future, in my absence, do show them the same affection that you have shown me all my life. He wrote this letter and gave this letter to his wife to keep. In the middle of a war, you can't send a letter. So he kept it with her, and then they left in the submarine towards South Asia, and a new phase again of the war of independence was to start there.